Hello and welcome back to Dave's Movie Diary, podcast where I ruminate about films that I've seen, the times when I saw them maybe the first time and how I've changed in the intervening years, or if it's a first up watch, just what I think about it from a middle-aged perspective. Today I'm talking about Romper Stomper from 1992. Got a long history with this one. I was there at the time. I was 19 when I saw it. It was a big deal in Australia in 1992. There was a build-up to this film. There was a lot of reaction to it. There was a lot of controversy caused by it, as expected. And I can still remember walking out afterwards with a whole bunch of guys. There must have been 4 or 5 of us. It was just such an intense experience. Everyone was pumped up and charged up. We're almost strutting around afterwards because the film does create such an adrenaline rush, especially if you're that age at that time. This was unlike anything Australian cinema had done before. Definitely in a mainstream, well-publicised film that was rolled out, I assume, in lots of cinemas, and it was so raw and dangerous. So I've seen it probably 8 or 9 times since. I think every time I come back to it, I find myself moving further away from the sort of the surface level violence, looking more closely at what the film's saying, the motivations of the characters, as you'd expect. 34 years later. So, 1992 was a really interesting period for Australian cinema, I think. There was a willingness around that time to make films that were really confronting and uncomfortable, and Jeffrey Wright was leading that vanguard. And this one definitely isn't a polished Hollywood-style production, but it is well made. It doesn't... it's not coming across as a patched together effort. It's really competently put together. Made on a shoestring budget, I'm assuming. There wouldn't have been much need to spend a whole lot of money when you watch this film. It's all set in and around the same gritty areas of Melbourne. But it was released during a period where questions about multiculturalism and racism and identity were very real conversations in Australia. It was around that time that, Tiananmen Square was 3 years earlier, and Bob Hawke had opened the door to, a lot more Chinese migration. And Australia had received quite a lot of Vietnamese migration a bit earlier. Of course, we'd had the waves of European migrants coming through since World War II. And Australia was definitely struggling as a nation to keep up with or make sense of or deal appropriately with all these different cultures that were converging to a relatively young society. So looking back now, it seems like a much longer than 34 years ago. And I know we still haven't got it right, but things have been done a hell of a lot better than they were in 1992. Let me tell you that. So what's the film about? Well, it follows Hando. That's the Russell Crowe character, and his bunch of neo-Nazi skinheads in the gang operating in these industrial suburbs around Melbourne. He's a fascinating character. He's charismatic. He's aggressive, obviously, but he's very intelligent too. He's got the ability to lead and influence the people around him, often for not great reasons, but he is definitely a leader. His closest friend is Davey, played by Daniel Pollock. Davey's a younger and more vulnerable member of the group, a bit more sensitive. He's after that acceptance and belonging, and he's a critical character as things go along. They're waging a war against Melbourne's Vietnamese community, especially in a local hotel that is on the verge of being bought by some Vietnamese people, and Hando and his gang are trying to keep the Vietnamese community at bay. When they have this clash at the start with this Asian gang, and it goes on for a while, and the Vietnamese counter with a wave of guys. There's heaps of them. The neo Nazis are massively outnumbered, and they retreat to their old tire factory warehouse, and they're forced out of there. They're under severe attack, and just before this had happened, Gabe, which is the character played by Jacqueline McKenzie, comes into their world. Initially becoming involved with Hando, and she's well into him and thinks that he's going to take her away and change her life. But right from the start, she's got a clear connection with Davey, and he's definitely got feelings for her, much more romantic feelings than Hando does. And Gabe's coming into it not just as a passive character caught between the two. She's got her own trauma to deal with. Her mother died a few years earlier. She suffered abuse from her father after her mother's death, sexual abuse. Her father's a well-known film director who lives in a lavish property in Melbourne. And when the neo-Nazis have to relocate to another abandoned warehouse, they desperately need money. Hando wants to get weapons and really take it to the Vietnamese, so they need to bankroll the weapons. So Gabe says, "I know a house that you can take that's better than anything you guys are thinking about," and it's her father's house. They go in there. It's like a Clockwork Orange, nearly frenzy style attack, and they screw it up, and doesn't work out the way they'd expected, and the gang starts to fragment. Then Gabe is exiled by Hando. She calls the police. The police converge. They shoot Bubba, the young kid who's hanging around the group, and it's all over then for the group. Some of them are arrested. Hando escapes. Davey had left when Gabe was exiled. He's living out the back of his mum's house, or his grandma's house in an old caravan. He reconnects there with her. They have a passionate encounter there. And Hando, of course, shows up like a bad penny and spoils the reunion, and they pull off a heist, the three of them on a service station. Hando kills the Indian owner, and then they're on the run. They end up there somewhere on the Great Ocean Road by the looks of it, and we get to the final scenes of the film. Final confrontation. That final confrontation definitely brings together everything that the film's been building towards. We've got Hando's obsession with power, ultimately. Davey caught between that and his genuine affection for Gabe, and we reach the end, which I won't spoil if you haven't seen the film. Jeffrey Wright filmed this. Interesting guy. He really burst onto the scene. He made a couple of earlier films that were quite interesting and did reasonably well in the Australian market. He he's very adept. The film seems almost documentary like, uses a lot of handheld cameras, rapid cuts. The natural locations are fantastic, give the film a real gritty realism. The tracks that he used um, are really brutal and well tuned to the violence on screen and just the gang ethos. Makes the violence feel chaotic and real. He's definitely not painting this as a glamorous world. He's not glamorizing this lifestyle. These guys live a shitty existence, living hand to mouth, which Gabe points out when she leaves. She says, "You guys can't even look after yourselves," which is true. He makes it seem like an exhausting and draining and frightening existence, to be fair. He went on to make another film called Metal Skin a couple of years after this, which I've also got fond recollections of. That I'm keen to rewatch, so it might pop up later on this pod. Made some other films that didn't really make the splash that Romper Stomper, and Romper Stomper is definitely the film that he's known for. So looking at his work, it seems to be that he's into outsiders and damaged characters, people existing on the edge of society, and just looking at what makes them tick. Melbourne as a character is one of the greatest strengths of the film. The setting, it's all in the industrial wastelands of Melbourne, apart from the scene in Gabe's father's house, which is probably in Toorak or somewhere like that. The empty factories near railway lines, abandoned spaces. The camera is constantly reminding us how separated these characters are from mainstream society. There's often these long shots to Melbourne itself in the distance, far from where these people find themselves in their own little isolated world. The opening scene, the opening music, before we even get to the scenes, the credits, immediately sets the tone. It sounds almost like a heartbeat, but a sinister one. Fantastic. Straight away, this is a serious film, and it's building the tension already. So there's no attempt to ease the audience into this world at all. Now, of course, the violence. There's a lot of violence in this film. Be warned, if you're not into violence or you can't handle much violence, this is not the film for you. The first assault is pretty shocking. There's 3 Asian teenagers at a train station who are just going about their business. They run smack into Hando's gang, and the attack is brutal. It goes on for a while, and the look on the gang members' faces as they attack these teenagers are very disturbing, nearly as disturbing as the violence itself. Then we've got the extended fight I referred to earlier, where the Asian gang hits back after the confrontation at the hotel. That's a really brutal fight too. At least it goes both ways. Magoo's boys are up from Canberra. That's the John Brumpton character. He gets his comeuppance in that scene, along with a couple of others. But yeah, it's extended and brutal. That handheld camera work that I referred to makes you feel like you're in amongst it. It really has a jarring effect. It still has a really big impact, so it's well done for the purposes of this film. But beware if this is not your thing. I found it interesting that Romper Stomper fleshes out the Hando character quite well. Yes, he's a racist. Obviously, he quotes from Mein Kampf. He's got Nazi paraphernalia everywhere. He's a violent character, but he's also highly intelligent and he's charismatic. He's very organized. He knows how to lead. He's capable of loyalty. He shows that. And he does have a softer side, oddly enough. The scene where he looks after Davey after the big party at the start when Magoo's boys arrive, Davy's passed out at the bottom of the stairs, and Hando props him up, puts a jacket over him. The scenes with Bubba, the young kid, he's sort of, I don't want to say like a father, but he is definitely mentoring him somehow, probably not in the right way, but at least providing some sort of oversight. And this complexity makes him even more dangerous, I think. It shows that even destructive people can do have moments of vulnerability, maybe, or caring aspects to their nature. And it's probably the part of what makes extremist groups appealing to vulnerable people. They offer that false sense of family and belonging. But yeah, it's well done. Russell Crowe. I think this is the first time I'd seen Russell Crowe. I know the film Proof came out the same year. I can't recall which one I saw first. But I remember at the time, he was everywhere. He just had an enormous impact coming out of this film. So magnetic. The physical transformation that he undertook. If you look at him in films like Proof, The Sum of Us, the year after with Jack Thompson, his hair's grown out again, and he's lost some of the condition that he put on for this role. But the shaved head and the size, he's all pumped up. The tats, of course, fantastic tats. I love the horn sort of tattoo that comes out of his collar up the side of one side of his neck. There is very very menacing. He is Hando. Like, I forgot it was Russell Crowe. It's transformational. It's a De Niro like transformation, like Raging Bull. And you look at his career after this. He went on to The Quick and the Dead with Hackman and Sharon Stone, Virtuosity, and then he really hit it big with LA Confidential in '97. Great film that, and he was one of the best things about it. The Insider in '99 with Michael Mann, brilliant change of pace role there as well. Again, becomes Jeffrey Wigand. Gladiator, the film that he won the Oscar for. I always thought he should have maybe got the Oscar for The Insider instead of Gladiator, but he was fantastic as Gladiator, mesmerizing in that performance. A Beautiful Mind after that. And plenty of other roles, of course, but I feel like that was his big moment, the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when he was top of the heap in Hollywood. And he's had one of the biggest Australian acting careers of all time. Up there, probably him and Mel Gibson, I would think. Heath Ledger for a shorter period of time. They really led the charge for actors. Jacqueline McKenzie is gay. Really interesting star of the early 90s, early to mid 90s. She was a major Australian talent around this time. She brings a lot of complexity to the character. She appears quite passive at first, but she soon shows that she's not. The scene with her dad when he comes to get her from where she's been staying, he feels her up and she hits him. The way that she takes revenge on him later by leading the gang to his house. The way that she stands up to Hando, very gutsy, and holds her own in that. And also towards the end of the film, she's very brave, and what a performance. Fantastic. The scenes between Gabe and Davey are some of the film's most human moments, and the fact that Jacqueline McKenzie and Daniel Pollock were in a relationship at the time, you can see the sparks. It makes a lot more sense to their scenes together. Really polished performance, and I know she was excellent in another film from the mid-90s called Angel Baby. And then she sort of popped up here and there. The film The Deep Blue Sea she was in the late 90s, but I don't recall hardly seeing her at all since then. I'm not sure what became of her, but she was a great performer. All right, on to Daniel Pollock as Davey. a lot to say here. He is fantastic in this role. He's got a lot to do, um, and it's a heartbreaking performance. Um, you can I felt sorry for him when he's actually got true feelings for this girl that Hando's just using, and he's constantly in the thrall of Hando. He's just such a vulnerable character. He just wants to be loved and accepted and belong somewhere. He tells the story of where his parents are. His dad's in Sydney somewhere. He's living with his grandmother. He seems to have more to him than just a skinhead. You compare him and Hando to the other guys in the gang who are just don't seem to have the smarts and are just there for a good time and bashing Asians. So fantastic performance. He'd been in a couple of Australian films prior to this, but his performance was rightly applauded at the time. Sadly, Daniel Pollock passed away before the film was released, a few months before the film was released, by suicide. Very tragic story. This was filmed in 1991, late 91. Unfortunately, Daniel Pollock had gotten into heroin a few years before. You can look all this up on the internet. He'd been involved with the death of one of his friends from a car accident, and he never quite recovered from that, and he couldn't seem to escape heroin's hold over him, and he had some legal problems at the time, and he chose to take his own life, which is just tragic in every way, of course, but I do think he could have gone on to be a fantastic Australian actor, like the other names that I mentioned when I was talking about Russell Crowe. So it's a tragic loss to Australian cinema. I just want to recognise how great he is in this film. There are some other familiar faces in the supporting cast, as there always are in some of these Australian films. Daniel Wiley is there as one of the hooligans. He pops up over and over again to this day in Australian productions. John Brumpton as Magoo. He shines in his brief time in this role, in this film. I've seen him in other things too. I couldn't name them. Steve Millichamp, far less known guy, but he shows up as the heavy with Gabe's father when they rescue Gabe from where she's staying at the start of the film. I thought, where have I seen this guy? And I thought, is he the guy in Mad Max? And he is. He was Roop in Mad Max. He's the one that's driving alongside the guy that gets the saucepan in his throat after they drive through the caravan chasing the Knight Rider at the start of Mad Max. Anyway, hadn't seen him since then. Just a reminder, I guess, of how strong Australian character actors were during this era. They popped up all over the place. Now, look, when I was watching this again, I was struck by how much it reminded me of American History X, which came out 6 years later. And I wouldn't like to say that American History X was directly influenced by Romper Stomper, but there are lots of similarities. Obviously, the exploration of neo-Nazi skinhead culture, and the violent brotherhoods, and the look of the films, and the rituals, the parties, the way the music, everything's very similar there. The charismatic leaders, and just how these extremist groups operate, and showing how hatred can really become an identity. I guess though the difference is that American History X is really structured more as a redemption story, even though it does have a tragic finale. Romper Stomper is more a snapshot that shows the collapse and emptiness of this world that these characters are in. Um, it's far bleaker, I think, overall than American History X, and that's saying something, isn't it? Both great films. I do remember when this film came out, the movie show here in Australia, which was an esteemed show on SBS, led by David Stratton and Margaret Pomeranz. Um, David Stratton, known internationally as a well-respected film critic, he hated this film. He said it was glorifying racism in the world that these characters exhibited, and he refused to even rate it. They used to give like a stars review up to 5 stars, and he wouldn't even rate it. And on the other hand, Margaret Pomeranz was saying that, rightly or wrongly, we need to see this. It's a great film. It's well made, and she rolled out all the positives about the film and why it is uncomfortable and why we need to see uncomfortable films. And she gave it 5 stars, and it showed the difference between them. I think I always related probably more to her reviews than his. She was more interested in, I guess, edginess. Although David Stratton was too, but he was obviously put off by the violence in this film, and that's fair enough. I get it. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong, but I remember that debate. It was a little bit explosive in terms of that show. And another thing that stands out. I did like the way the film finishes on the Victorian coastline. It changes the whole feeling of the movie, and just everything before that's been in these sweaty interiors, the abandoned warehouses, tyre factories, grotty little pubs, the train stations, even Davy's caravan. And then we're out in the beautiful, it looked like it's somewhere on the Great Ocean Road there. And I felt like the huge landscapes makes the character seem even smaller and more insignificant. And I couldn't help but notice the irony of the final scenes being witnessed by the Asian tourists up above with their cameras recording. And the people that are actually the targets of their hatred are just ordinary people watching the consequences unfold like a pantomime down below. So look, what was my experience overall? Back when I was 19 watching this, I was amped up by the energy and by the rawness and the thrill, obviously the danger. I acknowledge when I came out of this film, I was pumped up, not wanting to do what these characters do, but you felt alive. Forget the fact that these are really repellent characters for the most part, but Australia just hadn't made a film like this before, and I don't think I'd been at the cinema and seen a movie like that, apart from Clockwork Orange, which I'd seen probably 18 months before that, but it's a much more artistic film made by a known auteur. Anyway, it was a thrilling experience. Now when I watch it, I'm obviously a lot older. I can see the damage and the racism. The racism is so bad, and I know the film's not condoning it, but it is jarring. As someone who I do have close ties with Asian culture, family ties, and I've always abhorred racism in any way. And even though these characters are not glorified and they get what's coming to them, it's still tough to watch. It's tough to hear that and see it. But I noticed the insecurity of these characters too, and how empty they are underneath that surface level of aggression. So obviously, as always, the film hasn't changed. I have not in recognizing the racism. I did find the racism uncomfortable at the time, But to be honest, when I was 19, I hadn't had any exposure to the Asian community, really. Had lots of exposure to European communities and even Indian communities, Sri Lankan communities in Wollongong. It is a melting pot. The Asian community, not so much. So it did make it, even though I felt uncomfortable by the racism, I didn't feel anywhere near as uncomfortable as I do now, knowing a lot more and being involved in the Asian culture. So I've grown as a person, which is a good thing. Is it a date film? Probably not. Definitely not. It's too confronting and too intense. It would be a Travis Bickle mistake of epic proportions to take someone to Romper Stomper if it was showing, or to put it on. It's also not a hangover film. It's too much emotionally. It's too jarring. The music's too full on, I think. No, don't watch this with a hangover. Watch it by yourself, or with someone else that's up for confronting material. It's a time capsule of 1992, but go into it knowing what you're signing up for. It will take a lot out of you. So that leads me to my final thoughts, that nearly 35 years later, Romper Stomper does still pack a big punch. It remains one of this country's most confronting films. The subject matter is still relevant. There are these groups, you see them in the news, that are still around, that are still out and about and challenging the establishment. But the power from this film, I think, comes from the fact that the film doesn't create these problems. It's just reflecting society and human behavior, and at its base level, it's showing these lost people searching for identity and belonging and finding it in the worst possible place with Hando. And the film never tries to make the audience feel comfortable. It just lays out this scene and these people, and you've got to deal with it. And that's why it still endures, and that's why it's still relevant. And yeah, it was a great showcase for Jeffrey Wright, and Jacqueline McKenzie and Daniel Pollock, and probably above all, Russell Crowe. And he's definitely one of the most significant Australian films of its era. So yeah, worth checking out if you're up for it. I will say that. All right, thank you. That's the end. That's Romper Stomper from 1992. Thanks as always for listening in, and catch you next time.